I've shared with a lot of people in different industries the #1 most important ingredient to success, in my opinion, by far. It doesn't matter whether you sell insurance, real estate, multi-level marketing, vitamins, books, live events, webinars, it does not matter. The #1 key component in order to get people to say yes to your offer is to become the person people say yes to before they know what the offer is. And I have today a guest who wrote the book on the subject. It's not called How to Become the Person People Say Yes to Before They Know What the Offer Is, but it is called Key Person of Influence. My man, Daniel Priestley, all the way from the UK. Daniel, glad to have you here.
That would be a good title. I actually like that title, yeah.
That would be a good title.
That's a good title of a book.
That would be a good title of a book. But I've had people in multi-level marketing, in particular, especially ask me, like, how do you build a big multi-level marketing business? But it's true for real estate agents. It's true for insurance agents. It's true for car salespeople. It's true for anybody that sells anything to anyone. It's true for somebody who's applying for a job. Become the person people say yes to before they know what the offer is. For instance, let me give you an example. You get a random phone call from a random phone number, and you accidentally pick it up. Because, you know, we barely answer the phone calls of the people we know, so we're certainly not answering when we don't recognize it, right? Okay, so you answer it randomly, and they say, hey, my name is Wilbur Figueroa, and I'm calling because I thought you might be interested in building a multi-million-dollar business, and I'm going to be coaching 12 people in the next year to build multi-million-dollar businesses. Would you like us to consider you? Your first words out of your mouth would be, who are you again? Second words out of your mouth would be, how'd you get my phone number? Right? Am I telling the truth?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, but watch this. Phone rings. You answer it. Hello. Yes. This is Damon John from Shark Tank. I'm going to be coaching 12 people in the next 12 months to build multi-million-dollar businesses. And we saw some of the things you were doing online, and we would like to consider you. Would you like us to consider you as one of our potential candidates? What would your answer be? Yes.
Wow.
You know exactly the same amount. Both people gave you the same exact information, except one thing. One of them was Damon John, and the other one was Wilbur Figueroa. You know who Damon John is. You don't know who Wilbur Figueroa is. And so, why is it that you would say yes to Damon John without asking, well, how much does it cost? Where do I have to go? What do I have to do?
How'd you get my number?
You don't even ask him how you get. You just thank you for having my number, right? Right. And so, how can you become Damon John-esque? Here's how: become a key person of influence. And this person sitting right beside me is the genius that wrote the book on it. So, Daniel, I'm gonna turn it over to you for a second. So, say something about a key. By the way, I love the fact that it's key person of influence, because when you are a person of influence, it's like a key. I just thought of that just now.
I love that take on things. It is like a key. It opens up opportunities constantly, and people come to you for those keys to open up opportunities as well.
100%.
I'll give you some background around it. So for many years I was running conferences, and I witnessed the difference between the way people would go networking. In every conference, even in senior high-level conferences with executives, there are some people who are running around chasing opportunities and people deflecting, some people who have just got people coming up to them non-stop and they have to almost push people back. So I had this ability to witness key people of influence in a microcosm. I also saw the impact of standing on a stage. When someone is up there on a stage speaking, for the rest of the conference, people are just coming up to them and talking to them, and there's this key person of influence effect. When Obama ran his campaign in 2008, and he ran this thing called the Obama Everywhere social media campaign, I looked at that campaign and I went, that's the future. That is what every individual needs to do. They have to build this ability to connect. Let me zoom out a little bit as well. A lot of people in business, they want to be perceived as different. They want to be, how do I stand out? And I had an insight around how you stand out. And the insight was that we stand out through connection, not differentiation.
Did y'all hear that? We stand out through connection, not differentiation. That's so good.
Yeah. That
Because
was
when people feel connected to you, they're open.
And here's a clear example. If I was walking down the street, because we know each other, we have a connection. If I was walking down the street in Tampa and we didn't expect to see each other, and there's hundreds of people on the street, I could be dressed like every single other person on the street, no different. But if we've got a connection, Daniel, what are you doing
in
here?
Tampa?
Exactly. How come you didn't tell me you're in Tampa, right? Immediately your brain just goes bing, 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 bing. So it's not that a lot of people do stupid stuff to try and promote their business. The equivalent of dressing up as a dinosaur or whatever. They're trying to be different. They're trying to do things that no one else is doing. The reason that you love your best friend is not because they're different. The reason you love your best friend is because you're connected. You've built a connection. So I started studying how do people create connection at scale? How is it that people can create a connection with more than the normal number of people? Right? So most people are connected to a few hundred people, and they have built a connection with a few hundred people in their life. But some people have the ability to create a connection with 100,000 people.
And some 100 million.
And some 100 million people. So it was like, okay, well, what are they doing? How are they doing it? How are they creating a connection? Because they're differentiated to 100 million people in that case. Yeah.
That was so good. It's wow. It reminds me of so many things. Like you're talking about this whole connection piece. And it reminds me of the existential nature of the entire universe, right? It's all about connection, right? In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And he created the heaven and the earth, and he created the sun. He created three categories in creation. He created creation, which is the sun, the moon, the stars, the grass, the water, the trees. He created creatures, the dogs, the cats, the chimpanzees, the alligators, and the giraffes. And then, because God is spirit and creation is matter, it's stuff, and animals are bahema, and it is what it is. In other words, a horse is a horse is a horse, of course. And animals, it's a being, but it's not a spiritual being. God didn't have a connection with creation on a level. He didn't have connection with animals on a level. In order for God to have connection, he created man. And man is, the word man is Adam, and it's spelled in Hebrew Aleph, Daled, Mem. Well, Aleph is the letter that represents God. Elohim begins with Aleph, El Shaddai begins with Aleph. The letter Aleph is made from two yods and a vav. A yod is a hand, so it's made from two hands, and a vav is a nail. So the letter that represents God is made from two hands and a nail. And one hand is above the nail. I believe that represents God's hand. One hand is below the nail. I believe that represents man's hand. And so Aleph, Daled, Mem. And then Daled, Mem spells the word blood. And the life of the flesh is in the blood. And so what is man? What is it? And God called their name Adam. So men and women are made in the image of God. So what is a man? What is a woman? A godlike creation with flesh and blood. And now God has someone who's not him, but is like him, that he can connect with. Right? And God created, that's why we feel fulfilled. Here's what's fascinating. We feel most like God when we are being most like God. What does that mean? And when I say feel most like God, I mean like we feel peaceful and we feel powerful and we feel present when we are being most like God. What does that look like? Well, when we're using our creativity, because God's creative. So God made us in his image, which means he made us to be creative. But then he made man so he could connect, which means he made us for connection. So if you have creation in your life, but you have no connection, you feel unfulfilled. You have money, but you feel miserable. If you have connection, but you don't have creation, you might have a lot of great relationships, but you don't have any money, so you feel frustrated, right? And then man severed the relationship with God through sin, And so then God gave a contribution. He sent his son to die on the cross for our sin, which means that's the final piece to feeling fulfilled. Creation, and then connection, and then contribution. If I have all three of those things in my life, I'm fully fulfilled. And so no wonder God said it's not good for man to be alone. Man cannot be fulfilled if man is alone. Why? Because man needs to create something for someone else, connect with someone else, and contribute things to someone else. So that was really great, Daniel. All of that went through my brain while you were talking.
I've got to be careful what I say.
Clearly. So, y'all have heard me say many times, when I first started in business back in 1985, I was selling insurance and investments. Well, I was doing insurance and investment presentations. I wasn't selling any. And it took me 18 months from October of 1985 to April of 1987 before I made my first sale. Why? I'm going to tell you the reason I didn't make any sales. I wasn't good at sales, but that wasn't the only reason. Here's the other reason. I had no influence, or the influence that I had was marginal. See, what is influence anyway? Influence is like, so John Maxwell says that leadership is influence. Well, if he's right, if leadership is influence, then influence is leadership. So let me give you a sentence definition for that one-word definition, and that is leadership or influence are developing in other people a desire to follow you. So the question then becomes, how can I develop in you a desire to follow me? How can you develop in other people a desire to follow you? And you can do it by being a person they look up to, by doing things they appreciate, and by having things they desire. Daniel, what do you think?
I think that's spot on, yeah. I've done a lot of work on why people buy what they buy, and there's a mental model called a situational model that people have. And essentially, whether they're aware of it or not, people have a story, and the story is always pretty much the same, which is that they have a current reality, they have a desired reality, and they have obstacles and criteria as to what's going on. And when they look out into the world, they're looking for things that tune into that story. So the story
that was
is
so good. I hope y'all didn't miss that. They're looking for things that tune into that story. In other words, you have a perception of yourself and life, and you in life, and you're subconsciously, I think, you means like looking for things that match that, so you can validate that that is actually the way it is, when in reality that's actually the way you are.
Yeah. People, exactly. People are looking for things that represent the story. I once had a friend of mine who bought a Ferrari, and I said, why'd you buy a Ferrari? He said, because I want to influence young people who look up to Ferrari. I said, I don't care about the Ferrari. Like, I just need, the Ferrari is the way to get the attention. And the people who I want to influence, they need to know that I have a Ferrari so that they can relax and enjoy what I have to say.
They can enjoy the ride.
They can enjoy the ride. And he said, look, you know, to me the Ferrari is completely irrelevant, but the people that I want to help need to see the Ferrari.
So good.
So because that's part of that, they're looking for things that tune into that. So the way that people tune in is either the current reality. There's a resonance with my current reality. There's a resonance with my desired reality. There's a resonance with my obstacles, my criteria, my things that I've got in the way. Right?
So good.
And it's one of those three things.
And it might be all those.
And it could be all three things. Like, you came from where I came from, and you got to where I want to get to, and you overcame the things that I need to overcome. That is a very compelling story.
So good.
Yeah.
What he just said.
So that's their situational model. And a lot of businesses, they don't have the radical empathy for the customer. They just talk about what they do. Right?
Bro, you can't just say radical empathy and keep on going like you didn't say nothing. Radical empathy. Not just empathy, radical empathy. That's what I mean when I say obsess over other people's problems more than they do. You have radical empathy. I'm going to start using that. I'm going to say, I got it from Daniel. Daniel Priestley said radical empathy.
We're going to have some radical empathy.
That's it.
And the radical empathy is about what words do your customers use? When you're talking to your customer, how do they describe their situation? What words do they describe about what they're trying to get to? Now, the funny thing is that with your bigger insight around their situation, because you're always, if you've been on a journey, you've got a higher level insight as to what that journey looks like. People will shift over time. They will adopt different principles. They'll go on the journey and they'll come to the similar conclusions. But radical empathy says, hey, look, I know all that stuff that you imagine would solve all your problems. I know that, like, for example, a lot of the time it's like the word passive income. So someone who's in, when people have a frustration or a problem, they create a psychological counterweight on the other side that allows them to function, that allows them to stay sane. So if I ask someone, what's your dream situation? They say, I'd love to be on Oprah, right? I'd love to be on Oprah. Now what that tells me is that their current situation is that they feel ignored, they feel unseen. Right? So they've created a psychological counterweight called being on Oprah would be the ultimate counterweight to how I feel right now. 100%. I feel so invisible and so worthless that the psychological counterweight would be that being on Oprah means that I'm worth a lot and everyone can see it.
Wow.
Same thing with passive income. So the psychological counterweight is passive income. Over here, I'm working so hard and nothing's working and I earn so little. The psychological counterweight would be that I end up with money that just comes flowing in regardless of what I'm doing. Now, when you go on a big journey and when you've got a high level insight, you know that all this is nonsense, right? you know that their story about their situation isn't true.
Right.
And you know that the story about the thing that they desire is nonsense as well, right? You know that. Radical empathy says, I'll park all of that. Right? I'll park my opinions about what they're saying. I'll park my opinions about all of the stuff that's not right. But I'll start by tuning into where are you now? Where do you want to be? What's in the way? Let's talk about that. Then let's begin going on a journey together.
So good. I hope y'all are getting that. Clap it up for Daniel, y'all. It's interesting that in Scripture it says, it talks about strongholds, right? And what is a spiritual stronghold? A spiritual stronghold is a wall of protection that we build around a lie in our minds, right? Okay, and so we're actually protecting lies that are negatively impacting our lives. And the reason we're protecting those lies is because we're used to them, or we know them, or we're familiar with them, or we like them, or mama told us, or daddy told us, or grandmama told us. Somebody that we care about passed the lie to us, and we don't want to get rid of the lie, because if we get rid of the lie, we feel like we're getting rid of them, right? And so that's why when Daniel's talking about, okay, they believe this over here, and they believe this over here, and they believe these are the obstacles, and if you've been on the journey and you started where they were and you are where you are and it's where they desire to be and you overcame the same obstacles, you know all that stuff is nonsense. And the nonsense is the stronghold. Because they don't just believe the falsehood, they protect the falsehoods that they believe. Because they actually internally, at least on a subconscious level, believe that if these things that I believe are not the problem, if these things that I believe are the problem aren't the problem, then that only leaves me. So, and a really good picture, an Old Testament illustration of what it looks like to tear down a stronghold is Joshua and the children of Israel marching around the walls of Jericho. And it's about, and they were marching around the walls of Jericho in silence. And they marched around the walls of Jericho in silence for 7 days. And on the 7th day, they marched around the walls of Jericho for 7 times. And then they blew the trumpet. And then the walls just fell. And sometimes we have to walk around our obstacles in silence so we can hear the truth and let it resonate with us. Because if you don't tear down the walls, you can't evict the lie. So, anyway. So, believing things that are false about where you are and about where you want to go and about what's stopping you is worse than any of the obstacles you're actually facing. Yeah. So, good stuff, Daniel.
Yeah. Yep, those lies often are serving people in some way.
Right.
It's got them where they are. You know,
and it may have made you not like stay sane.
Yeah.
Right.
And transformation is where we see things from a completely different perspective. So in order to do transformational work, you need to start with the radical empathy, meet people where they are, and then begin them on a journey of where they go. And on that journey, they discover things that make them have a more fuller perspective. So the product that we offer, the offer, is actually always what we call a path of least resistance. The path of least resistance that you present to people, here's where you are now, here's where you want to be, here's all the things in the way. I've created a path of least resistance for people who are like in your situation, and this is the path of least resistance. And it has two ingredients in that path. The two ingredients is the principles and the process. So we have principles of the path and process for the path. So essentially, we say, in order to go on this path of least resistance, we've created these principles. So for example, I created the principles of pitch, publish, product profile, partnership. Those are the 5 things that you need to go there. But then there's a whole process for what to do in what order, and you've got to come along to this, and you've got to go to this, and you've got to fill this stuff out, and you've got to publish this kind of stuff. So there's this whole process there. But there's the core principles.
Can you give us those 5 things again?
You need to change the way that you pitch.
Pitch.
You need to publish more content that other people can get to know you through published content. You need to create a product ecosystem, offers. You need to raise your profile, and you need to do joint ventures and partnerships. So those are the 5 Ps that are those principles. But actually, every product that sells, everything that sells, has certain principles around it. If you go and have a look at Steve Jobs, who is probably one of the greatest product creators of all times, he almost always spoke in principles. He almost never talked about his products in the processes. He wouldn't tell you how big the hard drive was or what the processing speeds were or any of that sort of stuff. He would say, the principle here is we want you to have 10,000 songs in your pocket. Right? The principle here is that we want you to have a device that allows you to connect with the world, and we want it to be elegant. We want it to be powerful. We want it to be fun.
It's a phone, it's a browser, it's a music player. It's a phone, it's a browser, it's a music player. It's a phone, it's a browser, it's a music player.
Are you getting it? Right?
Right, exactly.
So he's, and when people would come to him with process-related things, he would revert back to principles. He'd say the principles are, like, for example, when he was creating iPod, he said the reason that the Sony Walkman worked is because you could operate it with one hand, and it was the device was in your hand, and you could use your thumb, and that's why the Walkman was so powerful. So we have to create something that never requires you to put a second hand on it. So one of his principles is that it works in one hand. You can have it in your left hand. If you're right-handed, you can be doing whatever you're doing, and you can operate this thing with your thumb. So that guided the whole thing. So all great product creators are exceptional at creating a set of principles and then a process for how those principles come to life.
So good. So very good. You know, it's interesting to me, for like in my own life, don't think that you guys are the only ones who suffer from the world's most prolific business disease, I'm just me-itis, inflammation of the I'm just me gland. Like you said, the first one is pitch, but the second one is publish. The less you publish, the harder you have to pitch, right? And so, like, I was probably one of the last ones to know how impactful my published content was. So I wasn't focused on it. I was like, well, this is just common knowledge. Well, it was just my common knowledge, right? And so it's easy for us to think about our stuff as being just our stuff, right? And I think about the fact that I created my YouTube account March 15th, 2007. Put up a couple of videos every now and then randomly. Eventually got to 10,000 subscribers by April 1st, 2023, or 2022. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna start being consistent. And now, 2 years of consistency, not 2 decades, 2 years. We have 659, 669 or 70,000, 670,000, I don't even know how many it is, subscribers on YouTube. And I gave it attention and intention because people cared about my content way more than I thought they would.
Going back to our point before, you didn't have to say anything different. You had to create more connection.
Exactly.
So when people hear you say stuff that they even know that's the same stuff they've heard before, but you say it more regularly, you say it with more stories, you say it consistently, you're not focusing on being radically different, you're focusing on being radically connected. And
that's so good.
You know, if I have heard a principle, and I know that principle is true, but I haven't heard it in a long time, and then you come and remind me of that principle, that has value.
Right.
Right. So consider that there's these two strategies for standing out: dressing up as a dinosaur, right? Which is like, I'm different. You've never seen this before. Right? Check this out, right? This is so different. Or showing up powerfully, showing up consistently, showing up for others, saying the same stuff, reminding people of the stuff. And I promise you, the dressing up as the dinosaur is not it. It's the connection. So that's how we stand out. We stand out through connection. There's another thing that just comes to mind here, and it's going to take us on a little bit of a different,
let's go.
Different direction. And there's something called doubling speed. Doubling speed is compounding. There are patterns of behavior, and every pattern of behavior that you exhibit has a doubling speed attached to that pattern of behavior. Right? So what we have is, if you publish 3 times a week, the doubling speed goes up. And if you publish once a week, the doubling speed comes down. And if you publish once a month, the doubling speed goes down again. So there are certain behaviors.
The doubling speed of what?
So the doubling speed.
Come on, bro.
So the doubling speed is that we live in an exponential time where things don't move in linear directions.
Correct.
So let me ask you a few questions. You got 600,000 followers now. Do you remember how long ago it was that you had 300,000 followers?
No. But I mean, we could figure it out.
Like, was it a year?
This time last year? Okay, it was this time last year.
So a year. And then my guess would be that it was a year before that you had 150,000.
No, a year before that I had 10.
So what happened is we ended up, basically what we did is we radically shifted the doubling speed, and it just went boom, 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 and suddenly it went 10 to 20, 20 to 40, 40 to 80, 80 to 160, 160 to 320, 320 to 640, and it went boom, 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 boom.
Right.
So the pattern of behavior transformed the doubling speed. Now, in exponential times, our human brains, we think most commonly in a linear direction, which if I said to you, take 10 linear steps, most people go, oh, it's probably from this wall to that wall, right? That's about 10 linear steps. If I said take 10 exponential steps, it seems strange, but you could walk halfway around the world with 10 exponential steps. You can actually get to the other side of the earth in 10 exponential steps. Our brain doesn't necessarily understand this exponential reality. So when we do things in a digital environment, online, which is an exponential environment,
because online is an exponent.
Right? The online spreads way faster. So when you adopt a new pattern of behavior, you will actually start to see the doubling speed increase. Now, what will happen is that many of you will get frustrated. You'll say, I did all this work, and I went from 500 followers to 1,000 followers. I go, how long did it take? 3 months. I say, watch what happens in the next 3 months. 1,000 to 2,000. Oh, well, yeah, but I'm working really hard, but it's not really paying off. I say, well, hold up. Your doubling speed is every 3 months right now. Keep going. 2,000 turns to 4,000. Oh, wait a second. The doubling speed's consistent. Now, 8,000, 16,000, 32,000, 64,000. So suddenly the doubling speed stays consistent. So what we want to look at is not the linear progress. We want to start asking ourselves the question, this pattern of behavior, what is the doubling speed attached to this pattern of behavior? Right? Is that making sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
That just made me dizzy. It was so good. I've never thought of that before in my life.
It applies to more than social media.
I know.
There is a doubling speed attached to your business. So now just consider this, there is a pattern of behavior. That pattern of behavior produces a doubling speed. For most patterns of behavior, the doubling speed, well, actually, there can be a halving speed as well. There are certain patterns of behavior that are going to halve your life and halve your life and halve your life, right? So you do them a little bit, it's not a big deal. You do it consistently, it's a big deal. So those things have an exponential halving speed. There are patterns of behavior that have exponential doubling speeds on the business because we live in an environment where things can radically shift pretty quickly. We don't live in a linear world anymore, in a digital world. So there are ways of running your company, there are ways of running your business that creates an exponential doubling speed. So, for example, if you take a look at McDonald's has a doubling speed of 4.2 years. And consistently throughout the last 60 or 70 years, since it was started in 1954, so it's coming up on 70 years, it's actually doubled its footprint every 4.2 years. And when you go from 1 restaurant to 2 restaurants, that's not a big deal. But when you go to 2 to 4, we're growing. 4 to 8, 8 to 16, 16 to 32, 32 to 64. And if you actually take the number of McDonald's that are in the world right now and just take every 4.2, you halve it, you actually see the actual progression of McDonald's. McDonald's actually halved and doubled about every 4.2 years. Nike's done the same. They have a way of running their business that creates a doubling speed that's consistent. Facebook was doing a doubling speed of every 9 months with the way they were doing things. So what we're looking for is a way of doing business that has a very high doubling speed attached to that way of doing business. The more you do things in the linear world, the slower the doubling speed. The more things you do things in the digital world, the faster the doubling speed. The more that you show up consistently and powerfully, the faster the doubling speed. The more you change your message and change who you are and change to meet the marketplace, the slower the doubling speed.
So good.
The businesses that have the best doubling speeds show up powerfully and consistently again and again and again and again. I'll give you
show up powerfully and consistently again and again and again.
Let me give you some examples. The most successful sports car is Porsche 911, and it's the only sports car of all the sports cars that made a particular way of showing up, and they just show up. Like a Porsche 911 today is a evolution of a Porsche 911 in 1963. Right? Anyone who was in 1963 could get teleported to today and go, hey, I think that looks a lot like a Porsche 911. There's no other sports car like that. And it's the most profitable and successful sports car of all time. The Fender Stratocaster guitar. Mr. Fender creates that guitar, and it's the most, and he doesn't mess with it. He shows up powerfully and consistently with a Fender Stratocaster. Tabasco sauce. They invent that hundreds of years ago, and they say, we've got our recipe, and we're just going to show up powerfully and consistently over time, right? And we're just going to go, we are Tabasco sauce, Tabasco sauce, Tabasco sauce, Tabasco sauce, and they just exponentially took over the whole world. You get Tabasco sauce everywhere. Metallica, the band Metallica. In 1984, they found that they had a sound, this hardcore heavy metal sound, and they said, look, not for everyone. We're not hip-hop artists. We don't change over the time. We just show up as Metallica. And they just started touring, three concerts a week for 50 years, I think it is. And they just do Metallica, and you either like it or you don't like it. But to this day, they play 3 stadiums a week with 80,000 people showing up. Because they
powerfully and consistently.
They show up powerfully and consistently, and they're not trying to be anything that they're not. So we look at these businesses that learn how to show up powerfully and consistently, and they publish 3 or 4 times a week. They do their thing 3 or 4 times a week, and that creates that pattern of behavior creates a very fast doubling speed, and then that doubling speed goes exponential, and then people clock you in the final double. They clock you in the final double. They go, oh yeah, I just saw Alex Hormozi. Well, did you know that Alex Hormozi did 3 podcast episodes for 4 years and never got more than a few thousand people listening? But then his doubling speed was moving all this time. Does everyone know who David Attenborough is? Yes. Right? So David Attenborough has been making nature documentaries back when television was black and white. No one watched nature documentaries with black and white television. Everyone thought he was absolutely insane. He turned down all of these high-profile game shows and all this sort of stuff. And he said, I make nature documentaries. That's what I do. Right? I love making nature documentaries. So he turns up and he does nature documentaries, documentary. For years, he never cracked more than 5,000 to 10,000 people. Then he cracked 10,000, then he cracked 20,000, then he cracked 100,000, then he cracked 1 million. Now his documentaries get seen by 1 billion people every time he drops a documentary out there in the world. Right? He's 100 in 2 years. Right? He's about to turn 100, but his doubling speed, he has done 70 years of consistency, right? Making nature documentaries for 70 years. It has a slow doubling speed. It's not a massive doubling speed. He doubles every 5 to 10 years. But because he's been doing it powerfully and consistently with a doubling speed attached, he's taken nature documentaries to the billions.
Okay, y'all can go home. That was great. That was mind-blowingly great. I have to think about that for a couple of days. No, I'm very serious. I have to think about that for a couple of days.
You're doing it. I mean, you're living it.
But that's one of the reasons why I have to think about it for a couple of days, so I can think about how to do it even better now that I know I'm doing it. I mean, I can see that I'm doing it, but I didn't know I was doing it. Now that I know I'm doing it, now not only can I do it powerfully and consistently, but I can do it powerfully, consistently, and intentionally.
Yeah.
See, you just added the level of intention.
Yeah.
Because you gave me a new awareness, just like I talked about yesterday. It begins with awareness, and then you set an intention, and then you make a decision.
I would be blown away to track your doubling speed and to actually see, like at some point, if we were to track the curve of your following and the different people, like how many people you impact and all that sort of stuff. And
that would be fascinating.
Yeah. Turns out you're Tabasco sauce.
So there. I want to say this. I've had a lot of great business conversations with a lot of great entrepreneurs, and Daniel, you have blown my mind multiple times today, multiple times this week. I appreciate you coming all the way from the UK to pour into these people in a way that is just life-changing and game-changing. So one time, can we just give it up big time for Daniel Fisher? Here.
Well, I appreciate the invitation. 100%, Thank you.
100%. Well, we're going to wrap this one up, and appreciate y'all watching on YouTube. Enjoy your life, apply these principles, and it will get better. Bye for now.